Okay, it's Monday, so against my better judgment, it's time to go to Reddit and see what we can find in this hive of scum and villainy. So I've been to the Overwatch University subreddit and I've just scraped all the questions off the first couple pages and we're going to answer them now. Why is Dragon Ball FighterZ playing in the background if we're talking about Overwatch? No cops allowed, okay? Leave me alone. So, if you're curious why we're doing this on Monday rather than Sunday, it's because I spent all of yesterday trying to get that fucking green screen to look right, and it just wouldn't. And as you can probably tell, I've given up on it, so that's why. I spent all day fucking with that and just didn't have time, so we're doing it today instead. So, first question. Is Orisa plus D.Va a good tank duo right now? And, it's fine. D.Va is pretty much always good. Like, it's hard to have D.Va be bad as the off-tank, just because D.Va does so many things. D.Va's, like, undisputably one of the best off-tanks in the game. Well, she probably is the best off-tank in the game, to be honest, because the other one is Zarya, but I think D.Va is slightly better than Zarya. And she, like, fits into more situations than Zarya does. If you're doing Orisa, most people will tell you to do Orisa Roadhog, because that's what Reddit says, pretty much. But, like, there's nothing wrong with doing Orisa D.Va. D.Va's still good. Like, all the advantages D.Va has, D.Va doesn't lose by playing with Orisa, right? Like, she still has Defense Matrix, which is a big one. She can still peel for her teammate. She can still, do the damage and all that. She still has, like, you know, not an amazing ultimate, but it's a good zoning ultimate, which can help if you're playing with an Orisa, because Orisa is usually, Orisa is bunker comps, right? So having a zoning ultimate is not exactly bad when you're talking about having a bunker comp. It's just kind of like a get the fuck off me kind of ultimate, right? So yeah, Orisa D.Va's fine. Usually you'd go, or people will tell you to go Roadhog as the off-tank, but there's nothing wrong with Orisa D.Va. People will tell you that, like, Orisa Zarya is just completely not feasible, but I've never really bought into that one, honestly. The main reason given is always just that, or the only reason ever given, to be honest with you, is that Orisa is not as good at helping you get charge as Reinhardt is, and yeah, you're right, Orisa's not as easy to get charged with as Reinhardt, but, like, frankly, if you're a good Zarya player, you should be fine. Like, you shouldn't need to be playing with the Reinhardt to make it work charge-wise. Like, you should be able to do it with an Orisa still. So, yeah, whatever. But, yeah, Orisa D.Va is fine. Next up is, which orb should I throw out as Moira, and when? And I've always thought of the orbs as basically being very similar to Fire Strike with Moira, which is you use the damage orb as much as possible until you have built up your ultimate, and then you stop using the damage orb as frequently. Then you save it for, like, more specific uses, you know. Where basically, if you don't need to be using a healing orb, and you don't right now, and you don't think you're going to need to in the near future, just, like, chuck a damage orb out at the enemy team, because it's going to get you some ult charge, right? And if you just chuck it straight into the enemy team, it'll frequently do its full damage, and you'll get max charge out of it, right? Then when you have Coalescence, though, there's no point doing that anymore, because you chucking the damage orb at them all the time is now not really accomplishing much except doing a little bit of chip damage, and that's kinda it, right? And probably just giving the enemy supports more ult charge by doing this pointless chip damage. So at that point, once you have Coalescence, you save the orb to either throw the damage orb at someone that you think you have a good chance of killing, or you just save it to use the healing orb instead. So I think that's the best use for the orbs as Moira, because, like, the benefit that Moira has, and, like, this is one of the few benefits she has over the other supports, right, is Moira, she's got two main things. She does the most healing of all of the supports, and she builds her ultimate very quickly. Now, the thing is, Coalescence is not a very good ultimate, right? Like, it's like a 5, 6 out of 10 ultimate. So, the only thing it has is that it charges very quickly, and it does damage and healing, right? So, if you are not using your damage orb as frequently as you can to generate ult charge, you are building your ultimate significantly slower as Moira. And then at that point, like, you having the faster charging ultimate, like, it's no benefit anymore, right? Because that's the thing it's got. It's not as good as other support ultimates are, but it charges way faster. So you've got to be generating charge to do that, and the easiest way to do that is use your damage orb as much as possible. And then save it once you have Coalescence built up. So there you go. Next up is, everyone is saying Orisa is super strong right now. What buffs did I miss out on? And there were buffs to Orisa, but those were not really what did it, because I mean, just recently she got the change where she can now reload and deploy her shield at the same time, which is extremely nice. I should have always been that way, really, but whatever, we got there. So that happened, and you know, there've been a couple other buffs, because they did the, she used to move at it was a 50% move speed reduction, and now it's only 30% move speed reduction, I think, when she's firing. I might have the numbers wrong on that, but they did buff her move speed while firing, basically. So there's been buffs to Orisa, but that's not really what happened to make Orisa better. It's more, well, a big part is that Batista got added to the game, which made bunker comps significantly stronger, because, I mean, that's like what Batista's fantastic at, right, is working with bunker comps. So that was a big part of it. And it's not, like, Winston is extremely difficult to play right now, and people have said, people have been trying to say Reinhardt's been dead for like 5 seasons at this point, which has not been true at any point in time for everybody, like, outside of very high SRs, right? But people have been trying to say that Reinhardt's been dead for ages, and now their people are using this current meta as yet further proof that Reinhardt's dead and needs buffs, blah, 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 which I still don't buy into, but, you know, whatever. So, but this is, you know, part of the reason. So there's that, and just Batista making bunker comp stronger, plus Winston being hard to play, plus people having been trying to make Reinhardt be dead for seasons. It's kind of like how, you know, how game companies try to tell us that we don't really want single-player games anymore. Those are dead, right? Because they want to have the multiplayer games out there. It's kind of like that. People just don't want to play Reinhardt, so they've been trying to tell you that Reinhardt's been dead for all of time, and Reinhardt has at no point actually died. But, you know, that's whatever. So, it's not really that anything happened to Orisa, it's just that changes happened around Orisa. Heroes like Winston became less popular, or less playable, really, because of heroes like Reaper, Bridget, McCree recently getting buffed didn't help Winston any. Mei is currently very popular. Like, all of these things made Winston significantly harder to play. And people are saying Reinhardt's hard to play, so dead. So that pretty much only leaves Orisa for most people at that point, because Hammond is a main tank, asterisk, if your teammates know how to play with a Hammond main tank, and you know how to play Hammond as a main tank. So, is sometimes a main tank. So that only really leaves Orisa, as far as the main tanks go, and just with Batista making bunker comps so strong, it just naturally falls in line that people would be more inclined to play Orisa because of these things. So, it's not that anything special happened to Orisa. Orisa did get buffed, but they're not the reasons that Orisa became super strong. So, there you go. Next up is quick play good for training? So, I appear to be in the minority opinion of this, but I'm of the opinion that quick play is completely worthless for practice in any way, because it just doesn't work. Like, quick play just doesn't operate like a competitive does in any way at all. To the extent that you can not even, like, navigate maps the same way that you would if you were playing, like, competitive. Because if you're playing competitive, people are more inclined, this is not always going to happen, but they are more inclined to pick reasonable team compositions, right? But if you are in quick play, you are frequently playing against 3 snipers, Mei, Torbjorn, maybe a healer, but let's be real, if they've got a healer, it's just Zenyatta. So, like, you can't even move around like, the maps the way you normally would. So I'm of the opinion it's a complete waste of time to use quick play for practice. The only thing I can see it being of any use for, really, is purely practicing, like, mechanics, like aim. But even if, like, that's what you're going for, I still think that it's better to just play free-for-all, pretty much, because that's just fighting all the time. So you can practice, like, mechanics more easily in that environment than in quick play a lot of the time. Just because it is just, like, pure fighting in free-for-all. So, no, I am of the opinion that quick play is completely worthless for training, but I do appear to be in the minority opinion of that. So, you know, take it for whatever it's worth, I guess. Next up is play close to the cart or far away on attack. And, you know, the short answer is it depends, but to expand more on that, it is typically better for most of your team to be playing further up and then only have one person on the cart. And the reason for this is the move speed buff you get for having all three people on the cart is not incredible. Like, it's not out of control high. And the benefit of having your teammates pushed further up is that, or the rest of your team pushed further up and having one person on the cart, is they are creating more space for the cart, and therefore the cart should be moving smoothly at all points in time. Whereas if, like, your whole team is clustered on the cart, as soon as they come up to you to have a team fight, then it stops moving. But if most of your team is holding them further up, and I don't mean, like, fighting 5v6, right? Like, you don't want to do that. But if the rest of your team is, like, posturing further ahead of the cart, then that's overall making the cart be moving more smoothly than if your entire team is sat on the cart. So that is usually the best case scenario. Now, the problem is with doing that outside of, like, some kind of organized setting, is that you cannot depend on your teammates to not do something stupid 5v6, right? You also cannot depend on the person on the cart to actually stay on the cart either. So, just the way that people are makes this not super viable to go for all the time, but it is better, in theory, to have your team playing further up. But in practice, it will usually be better for you to have your whole teams playing close to the cart, just because that removes, like, there's less chance of your team doing something stupid 5v6, pretty much. Also, like, if, like, one person's on the cart and the enemy team's got, like, a flanker on them, then if the team that's if the teammates that are pushing up are not, like, paying attention, then the guy on the cart can just get ganked and killed, and then, you know, nobody notices, the cart's not moving again suddenly, right? So there's things that can go wrong with doing it outside of, like, being in some kind of organized setting, pretty much, but it is theoretically better to do it with your team, most of your team further up and one person on the cart. Next up is, would I have been better off just playing and never reading all these guides and YouTube videos? And the main point for this person, which I do think that this can be the case, was that by reading on watching all the guides and everything, they think that they might just be in a position where now they're basically overthinking the situation and they've got more shit rattling around in their head than they need to. And I do think that that's possible to have happen, and I think this is most clearly shown by people who are in very low SRs, and they always say, like, I know how to play this game fantastically, but the problem is that they're in bronze, so they don't really know how to play the game, because they've been, like, for them anyway, because they've been reading and watching all these guides to try and get out of bronze, but all of the guides and videos are taking place from the perspective that the person is playing in some kind of high-level setting already, where their teammates are doing things they can depend upon, right? I remember watching somebody else do a VoD review once, and they said, you know, I'm Grandmaster, so I'm going to coach you from the perspective that you're also Grandmasters. And that's such a waste of time, because unless that person actually is Grandmasters, they're not playing the same game as you, right? Like, you have to tailor how you play the game to the rank that you're in. You can't operate under the assumption that, like, I can't give you advice that would work in Masters if you're in Bronze, because the shit I will tell you won't work in Bronze, because you're not playing with people that know how to play the game, so you have to adjust your playstyle as a result. And you might not know how to play the game yet either, right? So I can give you this advice, but then you don't know how to actually execute on it in practice either, right? So I didn't understand that at all. That's a bit of a tangent. So I do think that people bog themselves down with information that is not pertinent to them all the time. And this is why I deliberately leave out some advice as well, because I don't want to clutter people with things that they don't need to know for that rank. One example is whenever I'm watching someone play Soldier, if they are not in Plat, I'm not going to tell them to do the animation cancel, because you can cancel Soldier's auto reload animation with all of his abilities, including Sprint, because Soldier's finished reloading when he slaps the cartridge in the top of the gun, but it still does the cock animation. So you can cancel that by using any of your abilities. Easiest to do is Helix Rocket, but you can use any of them. But I won't say to do that to somebody if they're, like, in Bronze or Silver or even Gold, because then they're gonna be worried about doing this, and, like, it's not necessary for them to do that in the SR that they're in. Like, if they're in Plat, then they're getting at the point where I think that has become relevant information for them, where now they should start practicing doing that. But if they're in Bronze, they just need to know how to play the game. They don't need to know how to get every last little ounce of efficiency out of Soldier. So I don't want the person to be worrying about doing this animation cancelling while they're worrying about more important shit for them, like positioning and ult execution, right? Like, those are drastically more important things for them to know. So I don't say anything about the animation cancelling, because it's not important for them yet, if they're not, like, already a decent SR. So I do think that people, like, bog themselves down with it. Like, even, like, if it's a Winston, like, the maximum efficiency thing is, like, punch right before you land, but, like, again, I don't want to bog people down where they're worrying about that, when they should be worrying about more big picture things if they're in, like, Bronze, right? They don't need to worry about getting every ounce of efficiency out of Winston. They need to worry about not jumping into 6 people without their bubble up, right? Like, that's the important thing to focus on. So I do think that people, take in, like, more information than they frequently need, because the people most likely to be looking at guides are, like, people who are very low SR, or people who are very high SR already. Those seem to be the highest amount of people that look at, like, guide content, right? And in both counts, like, it's kind of pointless in its own way, because if you're already high SR, there's already not much you're gonna learn out of it, and to be honest with you, most people that are already high SR usually go looking at the guides just to, like, shit-talk the person that made the guide because they disagree with part of it. No, I'm not projecting, and that doesn't happen to me, no sir. But, and, like, the people in low SRs, they're gonna take in a bunch of information they don't need to know yet, because people are out here giving advice as if the person was in Grandmasters, which is pointless if you're in Bronze. I don't think it's bad to look at, like, guides and stuff, obviously. I don't think it's bad to do that, but I do think you need to be smart with how you use the information presented to you, right? Like, it's one of those things where watching the guide, reading the guide, it will not solve your problems for you. Like, it's not going to make you good at the game, just reading and watching the guide, but it will accelerate the process of getting good in most situations, because instead of needing to go out there and figuring all this information out yourself, you just had somebody tell you the information, right? So it removes part of the trial and error period that just comes along with, like, learning anything new, really. So it accelerates the process, but it doesn't just, like, skip you straight to the end. And you need to be aware that not everything you see in the guide is going to be relevant to you. So, I don't think it's bad, but I do think people bog themselves down with information they don't need a lot, and they worry about shit they don't need to. And they think that the guides are just gonna, like, skip them straight to Masters or Diamond or something somehow, when, unfortunately, getting good at something just doesn't work like that. Like, nothing does. Like, getting good at anything doesn't work like that. It always takes experience and practice to get good at anything, you know, unfortunately. Because also, just, like, knowing how to do something and then practicing it in the moment is completely different, right? Like, if you know, we've got a fighting game playing in the background. If, for example, in a fighting game, it is very easy to execute a combo on the training dummy. It is extremely difficult to execute the combo on somebody that is presenting resistance to you, right? Like somebody that is actually playing the game. Similarly, I actually did karate when I was way younger. And I got up to, like, brown belts. Some ways up the tiers of brown belt. And, you know, I've also, so I've done all that, and I've also fought real people. Right? And it is completely different fighting a real person to doing the training drill, right? It's a completely different experience. Doing something in theory and doing something in practice are two completely different skills that you need to develop, unfortunately. As heartbreaking as that is. So there you go. Anyway, short answer, no, but be smart with, like, how you use the information with a guide, and just be aware that, like, it's not gonna jump you up 12 tiers or anything like that. You still need to practice. So, next is, what DPS should I have in my hero pool to account for every situation? So, if we're going for just, like, the most well-rounded suite of DPS you can have, you definitely want McCree in there right now, because McCree is currently one of those heroes that is basically going to never be bad to have. He's very strong right now. This always happens with, like, DPS, as they, like, bounce all over the place, but, like, McCree is currently, like, pretty much, like, very top tier DPS. He was never bad, but, like, with the buff he just got, he has gotten better than he was, and a lot of people are saying he's completely overpowered now because of the buff. I don't agree with that, but McCree is definitely better now than he was previously, because, I mean, any buff is going to make you better, isn't it? Like, pretty much. So, McCree's very good right now. So he should definitely be in there. You want a flanker in there. Which one you pick doesn't really matter, but I think that the best one you could go for an all-rounder is Genji, just because Genji is least prone to getting countered, basically. Like, Reaper and Tracer can get fucked up more easily than Genji can. So I think Genji is just more well-rounded than the other ones are, but which flanker you pick doesn't really matter. I think it's a very narrow difference between all of them. And then you'd also want a longer range DPS as well, so Ashe, Hanzo, or Widow would be good to just slot in at the end, because then you've got flanker covered for if you're going a dive comp, and then you've got McCree for, like, just all-rounder, and then you've got long range if you need to deal with the longer range heroes as well, or you're playing with, like, a bunker, like, Deathball comp, someone like Soldier or Ashe is going to be better than McCree at, like, longer ranges. So there. So you want, like, one of all of those categories, pretty much, like, well, those two categories plus McCree right now, I think, but what would just, like, the three most well-rounded heroes look like? Might just pick, like, 3 DPS. It'd probably be McCree, Sombra, Hanzo. Because then you've got one for pretty much any situation that you can find yourself in. Because you've got Sombra counter bunkers and characters like Hammond and Doomfist. You've got McCree, who is just all-round very good. More or less no situation he's bad in. And then you've got Hanzo for breaking shields and burst damage plus long range. So, and they sort of all have, like, an ultimate covered, because Sombra's is good utility ultimate, Hanzo's is good damage ultimate, and then McCree's is pretty much in between, where you can use it as utility and zoning, or you can use it as damage just to get picks as well. So I think that would be like the three most well-rounded heroes, but you pretty much want like McCree, a flanker, and a long range. And I don't think which flanker long range hero you pick matters particularly much, but I think those would be like the three best if we're just like picking that. But those are like the categories you want covered pretty much. Yes, McCree is his own category, thank you for asking. Next up is, if your mechanical skill is great, but you are hard stuck, should you just make a new account? And the thing that was interesting to me about this post was this person wasn't talking about themselves, they were talking about their friend. And the person was, I think they said they were in Masters, and they said their friend was great mechanically, and just slightly worse than them, or maybe as good. But they said that their, quote, positioning is pretty good, and game sense isn't awful, which might be me reading too much into the isn't awful, but I was like, well, it's a little bit backhanded. Like, if the person's game sense is not very good, like, they're still not necessarily hard stuck, are they? Like, they're hard stuck to me is like when you've plateaued, and then you need to work very hard to, like, get over that plateau, pretty much, because it's gonna happen to you sooner or later. You're gonna reach a point where your skill, like, plateaus, and then you get, like, you're gonna hang out in an SR range for potentially a very long time, while you very slowly work on improving yourself. So that's gonna happen to you eventually, which is more what, like, hard stuck is to me, but, you know, personal definition might vary. So that was interesting to me. I was like, well, if your friend's game sense isn't awful, maybe you should help them work on that before anything else, right? But, so the thing is that mechanical skill can get you pretty far by itself, but it's not gonna get you all the way. And I know, I don't know this person specifically, but I was told a story once, or a couple times, about this. One of my viewers was telling me about this friend he has, who is in, I forget if he said Masters or Grandmasters. He was extremely high rank. Pretty sure he was higher rank than me, so he has to have been Grandmasters or top 500. But, so he got very high. Basically because he is extremely good mechanically. Because he's told me that he has some very interesting opinions about heroes, which is that, first off, Zarya is completely worthless. Like, a trash hero that's worthless. So, we've already got, like, a really big red flag right there, haven't we? And, this was back before Hanzo got changed. And he claimed that Hanzo was a hard counter to Pharah, which at the time of me being told this story was definitely not true. And I don't think is true now, but you can definitely say that, you can definitely consider Hanzo a counter to Pharah, but I don't think you can consider him a hard counter to Pharah still. So, you know, mechanical skill can get you pretty far if you are exceptionally good mechanically. But the problem is you do need to be exceptionally good mechanically to get very far off of it. Because if you're just pretty good, right, that's not gonna be enough. You need to be really fucking good if you're gonna get very far off just mechanical skill alone. And you're gonna need to be really mechanically good at specific heroes. Also, you're going to need to be really mechanically good at a hero like Widow, Ashe, McCree, Hanzo, I was gonna say Sombra. Sombra isn't a good one to just be good at mechanically. Like, Tracer, you need to be really mechanically good at, like, very specific heroes. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of people who are mechanically good. I've seen people who are in, like, Silver, that I would say mechanically, based off watching them, are probably about as good as, like, a Platinum or Diamond player. The problem is that's not enough to hard carry you out of, like, Gold, because we're only talking about being a tier or two better than you're currently at mechanically, and that's not enough. That's not a big enough skill discrepancy for you to ride that wave all the way up to Masters, right? Like, mechanical skill, I always find, is extremely over-focused on, because, well, it's a first-person shooter. Just click on their forehead, and then problem is solved. They're dead. And, you know, you're not wrong, but you're only looking at half the story. Like, game sense and meta-knowledge is still extremely important. Mechanical skill can't get you all the way by itself, unfortunately. Unless you really are just, like, a prodigy. So you do... Just because you're good mechanically doesn't mean you deserve to be a higher rank, because being a higher rank is more than just mechanical skill. It's also having game sense, teamwork, positioning. You need to know how to make a decent team comp. You need to know how to get efficiency out of your hero. You need to know how to play well in the situation that you're currently in. You need to learn how to identify and adapt to situations. Again, you need to learn how to do things in practice, not just in theory. There's so much that goes into being good at something than just mechanical skill. So, you know, I think it is, like, possible to get, like, a little fucked as far as, like, the matchmaking system goes, just because the matchmaking system isn't great. But the thing is with using it as an excuse is everybody's using the same system, right? Nobody's using a different matchmaking system. So if the matchmaking system seems unfair, like, it's unfair to everybody in the exact same way. Everybody's using the same system, and some people still do better in the system than other people do. So you can't use the matchmaking system as an excuse, because if it was the matchmaking system's fault, then nobody would ever get above Gold. But that doesn't happen. We can see, we've had it clearly demonstrated multiple times that people can climb from Bronze to, like, Masters playing just Mercy, right? Like, it's been clearly shown to us that no, it's not the matchmaking system's fault. So you can't use that as an excuse, but you can get a little fucked sometimes just because, like, you can end up being stuck somewhere where, like, the system thinks your MMR is way lower than you're actually at, so it's tries, because you went on, like, a huge losing streak or something, so it tries to shunt you down as quickly as it can to get, like, your SR and your MMR to, like, align as much as it can. So, like, that can happen to you, but that's, like, extremely outlier cases, right? Like, that's not gonna happen to anybody except extremely unlucky people. So still not really an issue, but no, like, no. So the short answer to the question was no. I don't think you should just make a new account if your mechanical skill is good, but you're hard stuck, because if you're hard stuck, I think it is more productive to just look at the reasons that you're hard stuck, right? Without, like, going, it's the system's fault. Everybody's using the same system. You can't use the system as an excuse. So you should be looking at what you could be doing to play better, rather than worrying about what the system's doing. You can't control the system, but you can control yourself. So that's a more productive way of doing things. And next up, and this is the last question for this week, is it better to solo queue or queue with other people for climbing in comp? And I think if you're trying to min-max it, the best possible number of people to queue with is one other person. I think it's best to duo queue, and that's it. The reason being is that the whole thought process behind climbing is just that if you're playing well, consistently, there's one less person on your team that can be playing badly because you're playing well consistently, right? So in theory, that means there's 5 people on your team that can play badly, but there's 6 people on the enemy team that can play badly. So over, you know, the span of your entire time playing the game, you'll slowly climb just because that's how statistics work. But, you know, sometimes that can take a long time, blah, 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 but that's the theory anyway. So if you queue with another person that you can rely on to play consistently well, you have just further stacked the odds in your favor, because now, instead of 5 people being able to play badly, you have 4 people being able to play badly. So you've just improved your chances again. And you might say, well, surely the more people I add in that I can rely on, the better the odds should get. And the thing is, the more people you slot in, the more you need, like, a different skill set at that point to climb, right? Because climbing solo and climbing as part of, like, a team is a entirely different situation. Because if you're queuing with 6 people, right, which, you know, we theoretically, like, if we're queuing with 5 other people we can rely on, right, we should have, like, 0 chance of losing, because we've got all these people we can rely on to play consistently well. The problem is you now need to play well as a team, and that's got its own issues attached to it, right? Because if you're queuing as 6 people, you're going to get queued against people that are playing as, like, you're going to get matched against 5 stacks and 6 stacks. So now you need to play well as a team, rather than being able to play well as an individual. And playing well as a team is a different issue, because now you need to worry about team comp, synergy, you need to worry about shot calling, you need to start attaching all these extra things to it. But if we're playing solo or duo, then we still just have to worry about playing individually well, because we're still playing with solo queue and duo queue people. We don't have to worry about, like, big teamwork situations. That can happen in, like, random groups still, but, like, it's extremely unlikely to happen, especially in, like, lower mid-range SRs. So I think it is best to go with 2 people, optimally, but, simultaneously, just like me personally, my personal experience with this thing is I find I climb better solo than anything else, because I know what happens is in my mind I get a little bit more complacent, and I'm not playing the game as well as I could be, because now I'm playing with my friend, right? So now I'm a little bit more relaxed about it. I'm, like, laughing and joking with my friend. I'm not taking it as seriously, and in my mind I'm like, I make this connection where I'm like, I can rely on this person more than the other people, so I get just, like, a little bit more, like, 1% more complacent than normal. So I know for me, it's like a mental thing, but I climb better by myself, just because at that point I'm, like, I'm taking the game completely seriously, right? Like, I'm not playing with my friend, I'm not joking around with anybody, I'm just playing the game. So I know that's better for me, but I think for most people, it's going to be better to queue with one other person and duo queue. Maybe 3 people. I could see the argument for 3 people, but because at that point, like, you're still not in, like, huge teamwork space, but you've still put, like, another person in there that you can rely on. But I think at that point, you're starting to toe the line between needing teamwork and not needing so much teamwork. So I think 2 is, like, the optimal number. And I've done it. I've gone and, like, answered the question right as I started this other game. So now we're just going to have to sit and make space while we wait for the game to finish, as is tradition. So, you know, yeah, I don't have any other questions to answer. So now we're basically just going to talk about Dragon Ball FighterZ. So Cell is still God's mistake, by the way. I'm still, like... Yeah, you might have noticed some overlap between the games we watched this time versus the games we watched last week, because I just haven't played the game this week, because part of it is that I started playing Dota Underlords, the auto chess game, and I've gotten, like, pretty into that. I've been having a good time with that. I'm more looking forward to when I can play the League of Legends one, Teamfight Tactics, just because that one looks like... I mean, first off, I play League of Legends, I don't play Dota, so I'm a little bit more invested in on that, but just, like, the mechanics are slightly different in a way that I find more appealing. plus being more in terms of things that I already understand, because I know who all the League of Legends characters are, but like the Dota characters I'm more lost with, right? But so I've been playing a lot of that, and then the other reason is just that, like, playing a fighting game is very exhausting. You know, like, playing a fighting game is a very exhausting experience for me, because I'm not, like, incredible at the game. I've gotten pretty up there. Like, I've gotten to Living Legend rank, which I think is the top 5% of the player base. It's something like that. It's, like, pretty high as far as the tiers go. It's not the highest one or anything, but it used to be, but they've added more tiers, because people have got, like, quintuple that number of points to get into Living Legend at this point. But, it's just so exhausting, and, like, I don't really get salty and tilted at video games that much. Like, I'm playing, like, League of Legends, Overwatch, and, like, I don't tilt, really, at all. Like, it's not an issue. But, like, when I play a fighting game, like, I get pretty tilted about it. Alright, I get pretty salty about it. Like, it still is, like, I'm not to the point where I'm just, like, completely comfortable with it, so I still get salty about it. And that just gets very exhausting very quickly, you know? Do I lose here? I could still lose here. Yep, fell for the bait. Thank goodness. Now we don't have to play any more, filling space. How about that? Like, check out Dota Underlords, though. It's free, so there's, like, no reason not to, and I have found it to be a very engaging experience, because it is, it's basically, like, wholly, like, mental. I like to play Mahjong, like, which might be a weird thing to suddenly pull out as being a fan of, but I'm a big fan of Mahjong, and playing, auto chess is a very similar kind of experience to me, where, like, ultimately you're still playing a game of chance, but you're basically trying to maximize your odds in the situation. There's a lot of, like, calculating how likely something is to work, and then, like, working out, like, the synergies and how likely you are to make this one work versus how likely you are to make that one, and, like, figuring out basically, like, you're getting given random chance, but you have to figure out the most optimal way to give the thing that you've been handed to work the way you've been handed. And I find that to be very engaging and very similar to, like, playing Mahjong, though it's, like, rules-wise, obviously, it's completely different, but it's, like, the same kind of, concept that you're working with, ultimately, which is just, like, manipulating random chance to favor you as much as you can. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer. If you haven't already, you can join our Discord and ask questions more directly and have a conversation about them, or just shitpost with us. I've started streaming on Twitch Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 8 p.m. EST till midnight EST. There's a link to the channel in the description, and if you managed to make it all the way through the video and somehow still enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more content of middling quality in the future, and I hope you found the video helpful.